Hello everyone, this is Reza Dorani. In this video, we will look at the responsive containers in Canvas apps. We will look at how we can leverage them in building responsive screens. We will leverage the new responsive screen layout types and build a screen that has a header, a footer, and a connected gallery and a form control, everything in a responsive manner. So let's not waste any time and get straight into this video. But first, my introduction. To get started with using the responsive containers in Power Apps, in your app, the first step you need to ensure is go to File, head over to Settings, go to Advanced Settings, and search for Containers. Now there's a preview feature called Layout Containers. If you build a new app, this will be turned on by default. For older apps, this would be turned off. You need this in order to utilize the new horizontal and vertical containers which are responsive. You need to also ensure, if you go to screen size and orientation, you need to turn off scale to fit for your app. Click apply, and these are the two settings that you need to ensure are in place prior to utilizing the responsive components. Now if you head over to the insert option on the left hand side menu, and if you search for container, there are two container options that are available, a horizontal container and a vertical container. Let me go ahead and pick the horizontal container right here. Now this is the new container control that is responsive. And in this container, you can add controls. So let's say I have this container selected. I will add a button. Once again, I will select the container, add a second button, select the container, add a third button. So all I've done right now is literally added 3 buttons. I have gone ahead and changed the text of the buttons to button 1, button 2, and button 3 respectively. Now if I select the container, if you look at the tree view, I have the container selected. Let's explore the properties of the container. The first property is the direction of the container. Since I picked a horizontal container, the direction is horizontal. So every control that I add to this container will be placed horizontally. If you look at the second option, I can change this to a vertical container, and this is exactly the same as me selecting the vertical container, and it will place the controls vertically. So let's go back and switch this to horizontal in this scenario. Justify is how do you want to justify the controls from a horizontal position standpoint? Do you want it at the start? So if I increase the width of this container, notice they're all sitting at the starting point, left justified basically. If I want to center justify this, or if I want to right justify this, or if I want them to be equal space between the three. So as you notice, as this container shrinks or expands, automatically it will place them equally. In this scenario, I will just go ahead and center justify them. We've also got the vertical alignment right here. The first option is start. Of course, it's sitting right at the top. Then I can bring them in the center. Now this depends on the height, of course. Next, I can place them at the end, or I can ask it to take the full height of the container. As the height of the container increases or decreases, you will note that it's going to take the full height of that specific container. The next property is gap. So if I define, for example, let's say 10 pixels, it's going to actually go ahead and create a gap between those controls in this specific container. Next, we have the overflow properties. So for horizontal overflow or vertical overflow, do you want to hide it or do you want to add a scroll bar? So in this case, let's say I pick scrolling for horizontal. As you can see, as the width of the container decreases, I do see a scroll bar right here. And if I hide this, I won't see that option. The next property is wrap. Now, wrap is turned off. Now, if I turn this on and if I start decreasing the width of this container, you will note that it starts wrapping the controls. And if I start shrinking the height, of course, and let's say I go to the vertical overflow, and this time if I say add a scroll, that's where I'll see that scroll bar. I'm going to go back, increase the width. It will go ahead and occupy the space that's available, so it is not wrapping at the moment. So these are all the properties associated with a container. The next important thing to note is that the controls that you add within the container. So right now I have button 1 selected. there are specific properties that show up for those controls. So if you look at this control, first thing is alignment in the container. It is set by the container, which is the parent in this case. Now the vertical alignment here is stretch. If I want this to be placed on the top, I can select this and it will actually, only for this button, place it at that position, purely because I am going ahead and defining a custom alignment option for this control. If I go back to set by container, it will go back to its original state. Next thing is, because I have created this horizontal container, I can leverage the flexible width property. So if I turn this on, you will note that for this button, the width is flexible. That means it is going to occupy the entire space that is pending in the width of this container. So if the container width increases, notice that button 1, the width is flexible, right? It's changing. Also, if I do the same thing, let's say for a second button, so here's button number 2, I will turn on flexible width. Now notice this time, if I select the container and if I start increasing or decreasing the width, you will observe that both button 1 and button 2, their width is changing. Selecting button 1 again, you will note that there's also something known as fill portions. Now, right now I have 2 controls within the container that have the flexible width turned on. I turned it on for button 1, I turned it on for button 2. That's why if you look at fill portions, it says 1 of 2. That means it's going to take 50% of the available space. If I wanted button 1 to take 2/3 of the space, all I have to do is just put fill portion as 2. This will automatically change to 2/3. And for button 2, it would be 1/3. That means now if I select the container and if I start decreasing or increasing the width, you will notice how button 1 takes 2/3 of the space, button 2 gets 1/3, and button 3 has its own fixed defined width. Of course, if I go back to button 3 and if I turn on flexible width for this, the formula is going to change. Button 3 is taking 1/4, button 2 is taking 1/4, and button 1 would be taking half of the space. So you can define how the fill portions work out. So these are some of the basic properties of containers and controls within the containers that you add. If I go to new screen, you will notice that there are 3 new layout options that show up. There's a split screen option, there's a sidebar option, and there's a header, main section, and footer option. So let's go ahead and select the header, main section, footer layout type. If I select this, this will go and create a new screen for me, and right here it's adding those same container options for me. I have the main container, which is a vertical container, and within the container I have additional containers. Important to note, you can nest containers. So I can have a container within another container, and that's exactly what has been done right here. If you notice the vertical container that's been placed right here, the vertical justification is start, the horizontal justification is stretch, and there is no wrapping that's taking place. Another very important thing to note is for this container that comes as part of the layout, if I look at the width property, you will note that the width is parent.width. Remember, for responsiveness, everything has to be related to the width and height of the screen. So if you look at this in action right now, parent.width, parent.width is basically the screen.width, because the parent control for the screen container control that I have highlighted is the screen. And that's why the width is parent.width. And if you focus on the height, it's parent.height. So it's important to note that. Also, this is a vertical container, and within this container, we have 3 additional containers. Now, if you look at the header container, the first control, if you look at the property of the header container in this scenario, the flexible height is turned off and there's a defined height of 75. That's the height of the first control right here. Same goes for footer. Footer has a defined height of 75. The flexible height property is turned off. But for the main container, the flexible height property is turned on, and it's going to take 1 of 1. That means whatever remaining height is present, it's going to go ahead and grab that. So it's important to understand how these different screen layout types have been structured. Let's go ahead and try adding a few controls to this. So for the header container, let's say I would like to add a label that is responsive, of course, that goes into that container. So how would I do that? We will go to insert and add a label. So this will go ahead and add a label for me right here within the container, which is a horizontal container. Now, first thing is when I pick this horizontal container, I want to change the horizontal alignment to center, and I would like to also change the vertical alignment to center. And that's exactly what I've done right here. For the container, I will give this a background color of, let's say, blue. And I will head back to my label right now and go ahead and change the color property to white and maybe increase the size of the label to 20. I would like this label to stretch the entire height that is available in my container. And of course the width as well, I would like it to be flexible, and I would like the text to be aligned in the center. So I've just gone ahead and given this some text. So this is my student portal app. Now, if I was to play this app right now, preview this by pressing the F5 key or just playing the app, it is showing me the preview of the app. However, now in preview, if you shrink the size of the window, right, you will note that it is actually allowing us to see the responsive behavior of the app in action. Before this, we did not have this option in preview, and we had to publish the app to check responsiveness. So this is a brand new feature that's come in as well, which is very, very handy for testing our app right here. Also, if you would like to change this back to the typical experience, this is the typical canvas size, and this is how it used to be. It did not respect the browser size when you were previewing it before. But now, if I select the window size, it will respect the size of my window. So as the height or the width of my window changes, you will note that the behavior also changes. So this is great for testing responsiveness right here in the context of the preview mode of the app. Let's go ahead and add a couple of controls to the footer. Let's say I would like to go ahead and add a couple of labels to the footer. So for the first label, I'm going to give it some text. I've said all rights reserved. And for the second label, for the text property, I will give the current year. Okay. Once again, for my footer container, I would like to add a background color. For both the labels, I've gone ahead and changed the color as well. Now, if you look at the footer container, based on the layout, it had a height of 75. You can change this. So if I want this to be at a height of 50, I can change the height to be 50. Also, this container is a horizontal container. So I can go to the independent controls within this container. If I go to the first label control, I can make the width flexible. So if I turn on flexible width, and if I say 1 of 1, so it's going to take the full width that is available. And that's exactly what I want. I want all rights reserved to have the full flexible width. And on the other hand, I would like that label to have a width of 150. Now, if I go ahead and preview this app, as I start decreasing the width, notice how the app is responsive, right? You see the header, it's centered. If you look at the footer, both the controls are responsive. The width changes, the controls are accordingly positioned. Now let's look at the main section container. That's the container in the center that has the flexible height. Now, this is a vertical container. I will go ahead and change this to a horizontal container purely because I want my controls that I'm going to add in the middle section to sit horizontally. And the two controls that I would like to add here are, I will first add a flexible height gallery. That's one. And second, I will once again select the container. Important to make the right selection. And then I'll go to form and add a display form. Now for the gallery, I will connect this to a data source that I have already connected in my app. So I will just connect this to my students data set. And for this flexible height gallery right here, I'm going to go to edit and add maybe 3 labels. It's going to give me the student name, the region the student belongs to, and the class the student belongs to. So I have this gallery and I'm going to rename this gallery to gallery students. Now I have this form control that I created. So I've renamed this to form control students, and the data source for this form control is going to be the students data set. So this will go ahead and add all the fields. I will go ahead and select specific fields that I want to show up. So I have gone ahead and selected my fields, and these are the different fields that are showing up right here. Now I would like to connect this form control with the gallery. And if you look at the item property of the form control, because the data sources are the same, I can create this connected experience of the gallery and the form control. And all I have to do right here is write the formula gallery students dot selected. So when I make a selection in the gallery, it's going to show me the details of that student right here on the form control. Now we have a horizontal container, and within this container, I have a couple of controls. I have the gallery and I have the form control. Now for the form control, I have the flexible width turned on, and right now the fill portion is 1 of 2, but I want to give the form more width than the gallery, so I'm going to just put 2 in fill portions. So the form control is going to take 2/3 of the space, and on the other side, the gallery is going to take 1/3 of the space. Also for the container, I will go ahead and turn on the wrap. Back to the student gallery, notice there is a minimum width that has been defined for this. So I'm going to define a minimum width in this case for my gallery of 250, and I will do the same thing for the form control wherein I will give a minimum width. That means the width cannot go lower than this width that I am defining, even though the flexible width is turned on. And with me turning on wrap for the main container, once the width of the entire screen goes below those minimum defined widths combined, it will go ahead and wrap the controls. Now if I play this app and if I start reducing the width, you will note that the moment the width goes below the combination of those two widths, which was 250, that's 500 pixels, the moment it goes below that, it will wrap. So as you can see, the gallery is now sitting on the top and my form control is right here at the bottom. And if the width increases, you will observe that the elements are once again stacked next to each other horizontally. Now if I change the height, of course, because the center container is flexible height, you will note that the header and footer are like sticky headers and footers, so they are staying there, but the center section is where the height is changing. Now back to the app. If I look at the gallery control right here, I would like to give a template fill property for the gallery to showcase what item is selected. So my formula is going to be if this item dot is selected. So if this is the selected item, let's give the color light blue, else let's give the color light gray. Now just by doing that, you will observe that any item that has been selected in the gallery, so if I preview the app, if I pick James Mary, you will note that the form control shows me data about James Mary. Next thing is, for the form control, you will note that snap to columns is turned on, and by default it's showing me 3 columns. Now I can change this to even be 4 columns, and it will have 4 columns sitting next to each other. Now if I preview this app, notice that as I reduce the width of my screen, you see how the form control itself changes its behavior. See, as the width starts decreasing, it has less width, so it automatically adjusts the controls of the form, which is very neat. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is the height aspect. Now, important to note that this container is a horizontal container, right? And the height of this container, of course, is flexible. Now, if you look at the students gallery and if you look at the height property for this, it has a fixed height here in this case of 575. Let's add a border thickness around this, and let's do the same thing for the form control as well. If you look at the form control, it has a height of 500, and if we add a border thickness to this, and if I preview the app again, observe that the height, although the main section is flexible, but the height is fixed. The reason is because I'm leveraging a horizontal container right here. So with a horizontal container, what I get is flexible width. With a vertical container, I will get flexible height. So how do I adjust the height of the gallery and the form control so that it consumes the entire height? Now, you would think that I can go to the gallery control and go to height and write something like parent. And what's the parent of the gallery? It's the horizontal controller. So if I do parent.height, this should give me the correct value, but it does not. Parent.height has that fixed height that is set for this container, which is 200. In fact, if you go to the advanced property of this container and search for the height, you'll see that number right here. So parent.height is not giving me the actual height that is available for that container. So how do I get that height? So one way to get that height is this. We need the height of the screen first. And how do you get the height of the screen? So let me rename my screen first. Let me call this my home screen. Okay, so here's my home screen. If you look at the height of the gallery now, I can use home screen dot height. And this will give me the actual height of the home screen. And from this, I would like to subtract the header container dot height. Remember, the header container has a fixed height, and subtract the footer container dot height. Even the footer container had a fixed height. And now if I preview this app, you will observe that the gallery is taking the full height, and as I increase or decrease the height, it will automatically adjust. Now I would like to do the same thing for the form control. So I can go to the gallery height, copy this, go to the form control, and define the height right here. And now if I preview the app, you will observe, based on the border that I defined, it's taking the full height of the screen, and it's flexible. As the screen height changes, it will automatically be responsive. Now in preview mode, if I start shrinking the width, of course, because I turned on wrap, the gallery control and the form control will wrap. But if you note something, the gallery is sitting on the top, the form is sitting at the bottom. And for me to get to the form, I need to literally traverse through the whole gallery. That is purely because of the height calculation that I put in place. So what I would like to do, if the width goes below a certain point wherein it wraps, I would like the height of the gallery to be half of the screen height and the form control to take the remaining half so the user can see it when they wrap together. So how do we achieve something like that? Once again, if I pick the gallery control, you will notice I have the height property that I'm defining right here. Now I need to half the height only when the screen wraps. Now the screen has a property called size. Now what is the screen size property? Now as part of a previous video that I did on responsive design, I covered the entire concept of screen sizing. So I'll put a link to that in the description of this video. So do check that one out. But just to throw some light on this, the screen size property basically returns 4 values, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it tells you what type of device the user is on. If the user is on a phone, that's 1. If he's on a tablet device that's held vertically, that's 2. Horizontal is 3. Computer is 4. And this is a very useful property that you can leverage. And I'll show you how I'm going to leverage this right now. If I head back to my app, for my gallery, I'm going to write some logic for the height property. I will add a switch case, and my switch case would be on the home screen. That's my screen dot size. So this will give me the size of my current screen. And if this is screen size dot small, then I would like to go ahead and basically the calculated height divided by 2, else I would like to keep the height calculation. Okay, so I'm just going to paste this right here, close this, and this is what my formula looks like. Let me go ahead and format this. So if the screen size is small, then I'm going to divide the height by 2, the calculated height, else I'm going to keep the original calculated height. And I'm going to copy this and apply the same logic to the height of the form control. Now if I play this app, let's see what happens when I shrink the width. So as the width shrinks, the moment it wraps, notice what happens now. The screen size now is small. So what it's done in this scenario, it's gone ahead and given 50% of the height to the gallery control and the remaining 50% to the form control. So I can make selections right here and I can see the form control right at the bottom. And as I decrease the height, it will automatically adjust. As I increase the width, it will automatically adjust. Now, as you can see, this is truly a responsive screen. Now, these are canvas apps. Model-driven apps on the other side are truly responsive by design. These responsive containers are here to help us, but as you can see, there is still work that has to be done in order to truly build fully responsive apps. I hope you liked this video. If you did, then do like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching.